Hey everyone, this is David Brown. It's around 6:40 a.m. on June 27th, 2024, and I'm here at the Loyalsock State Forest, Jacoby Falls Trailhead. You can see it's a beautiful morning here. We had some rain go through last night, so a little bit foggy. There's my car, and you can see some mountains behind me as well. I have three main goals for the morning. First of all, it's going to be a nature hike focusing on putting birds in eBird for the PA Bird Atlas and doing iNaturalist to document the plants that I'm seeing, with the specific target plant being walking fern, which is a species I've seen here in the past. I'd love to see that again. Number two, I'd like to see the waterfall, and hopefully it's flowing pretty good after yesterday's rain. And number three, I'd like to see if I can safely get above the waterfall and get onto a trail that meets up with the trails off of Dad Chapman Road, so that in the future we can do that as a one-way traveling instead of having to walk in and back. So if you're ready, let's go on a hike. The hike starts off on this boardwalk going through a wetland area. You can see a lot of cattails here. Here we have some jewelweed, or touch-me-not. We see the orange flower indicating that it's the common jewelweed, Impatiens capensis. And the interesting thing about the jewelweeds is that their leaves really repel water. So you can see that the drops of water from the rain just have balled up on the upper surface of the leaf. And you can dip these in water and the water will just run right off of them. Very interesting plant. As we get ready to enter the woods, we hear one of the classic sounds of north central Pennsylvania, the song of the wood thrush. For most of this hike, I'll be out of cell phone range, so I won't be able to look up the IDs of things on iNaturalist, but I can still take photos of them and then look up the IDs when I get back home. Here's a tree with a very distinctive leaf. This is a tulip tree or tulip poplar, and these can grow really straight and tall. So a lot of times all the leaves are way up at the top of the tree, but here we have a real small one just starting to grow. So far, it's a nice cool morning and it's not too buggy, so I hope it stays that way. Here we have some rhododendron that is still in bloom, and an ovenbird singing along with the red-eyed vireo. You can remember the song of the ovenbird because it sounds like it's saying teacher, 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 teacher. Here's an area that's a little more open, and you can see that the understory has been completely taken over by hay-scented fern, which is a native species, but it can just grow and take over an entire area. The trail is now next to this stream, which it will essentially follow the rest of the way, all the way up to the waterfall of Jacoby Falls. Here we have a really nice clump of polypody ferns. I believe these would be rock polypody. There's also a very similar, more northerly species that I think would be possible to see as well. I just came up on this area where there's a lot of storm damage and trees down over the trail, and it looks like some big white pine trees that they broke off here, this one especially. So I don't know if that's from yesterday's storm or from another recent storm, but definitely a lot of branches down over the trail, but I should have no problem getting by. Actually, as I'm starting to walk through here, there's a lot more tree damage than I originally thought there was. I'm not even really sure where the trail is, but I should be able to climb over stuff and continue on, but definitely a lot of storm damage here. All right, well, I made it through, and check out this huge rock here. And I wanted to point out that this also has some rock polypody growing on it as well. Now we're coming up on a section where the trail is climbing more uphill. I'm hearing some junco sing, I'm hearing veery, red-eyed vireo, there's a woodpecker tapping, and also common yellowthroat, which seems a little unusual for this habitat. Here we have a trillium growing right alongside the path, and I'm not great with trilliums. I believe, is this one called red trillium? If that's not right, I'll put the correct name on the screen, but fairly large plant and really cool. Here we have the red eft stage of the eastern newt. I think sometimes you also hear them called red spotted, but just a really cool animal. I'm gonna try to get close without spooking them too much. There's certain places I hike that I see these quite a bit, and other places I don't see them, so must be something to do with the habitat, but really interesting animal. I found a toad, and I believe in this area we can both have American toad and Fowler's toad, and honestly I'm not sure of the difference. I'll have to look it up, so leave a comment if you know which one this is. Here's a beautiful spot where you have this tiny trickle of a stream that you have to climb across as it heads down towards the main stream down in the valley below. Here we have an American beech tree, and this is a smooth-barked tree that people like to carve their initials into. And if we look at a smaller one over here, we can take a look at the leaves, and when you feel the leaves, they almost feel fake. They feel really plasticky. That's one way that you can identify this species, and it's a species that has had some struggles like many of our trees. It gets some sort of bark disease, and more recently there's also some sort of nematode that is attacking the leaves. So species that's kind of struggling in Pennsylvania and beyond now, but still fairly common to see. Here's another tree down over the path, and this is a fairly large one. You can see the trunk extends all the way back there. And this appears to be a basswood tree. If we take a look at the leaves, big spider right there. How about I grab a different one? It's got these very big rounded leaves, almost heart-shaped. Here's another one of our little newt buddies. He's probably not too happy that I'm sticking my camera in his face, but letting us get a really nice close-up look at this incredible creature. Earlier, we took a look at common jewelweed, which has orange flowers. Here we have the other species of jewelweed, which is pale jewelweed, which has yellow flowers. And again, you can see that the leaves are very hydrophobic. They repel water. Now we're at a spot where we just came out of the woods here, and now we're going to walk along this forest access road for a little while. Here we have a large fern, and this is called interrupted fern because if we look at the fronds, you can see that it has the sterile part down below at the bottom, and then you have a section of fertile, and then you're back to the sterile section again. So it's very similar to other species like cinnamon fern, but we're looking for that pattern of the fertile part of the frond interrupting the sterile parts. Along this road, we see some familiar plants of disturbed habitats. Here we have some mugwort, and you see that the ground is almost completely covered in Japanese stilt grass. Here's another fern that's one of the reasons I wanted to come here today. This is maidenhair fern, and it sort of superficially resembles the ebony spleenwort that we were looking at yesterday, but it has a much different shape to it. You can see the overall way it kind of curves and branches, much different than we saw in the spleenwort. There's actually a pipeline here, which is the reason for the road, and here's where the road crosses the creek. But if we look, there's no water flowing here. This is actually a section where the creek runs underground. But if we look just right here, we do see water. So at some point here, it goes underground, and it stays that way for quite a while. Here the trail crosses the creek again, although it's dry at this spot as well. But there's some nice birds singing here. We have a veery, a black-throated green warbler, and a winter wren. There are these green barriers, I guess, to keep contaminants out of the creek, but check out the gnarly mushrooms that are growing up out of this. Looks like they've seen better days, but really cool. I know very little about mushrooms, but I like to photograph them when I see them. Here's a spot where the road continues on up, but actually if we want to stay on the trail to the waterfall, we have to stay here to the left. Check out the bark of this yellow birch tree. Very beautiful. All right, we're in the last stretch heading up towards the Jacoby Falls waterfall. This area is a little rugged. You have to be careful where you're stepping. The rocks are a bit slippery, but it's just a really beautiful area. You can see a little waterfall down there as well. I'm really taking a close look at everything as I go along because I know this is the stretch where you can find walking fern. I found it. Here it is. This is walking fern. And you might say, where? I don't see any ferns. But actually, I'm talking about this plant right here with these really long, skinny fronds. And this is a really unique fern. It doesn't have that lacy appearance that most of our ferns have. And it's called walking fern. And I wish I was better at fern terminology to explain this correctly, but the reason it's called walking fern is because it's got these really long leaves, and then actually the tip of the frond there, that will put down, and that will be the place that the new plant generates from. And this is a fairly rare fern from what I understand. It needs very specific habitat, and this habitat up here is perfect. It's kind of a wet area. You can see lots of moss growing, and we're not too far from the waterfall. But this is a plant that I discovered here when I was hiking here last summer, and it's one of those plants I had seen in the fern book and had hoped to see one day, and then I was really excited when I came across it. So this is actually the only place I've ever seen it, I think. I don't get into this type of habitat too much. So this is a really special plant, and I took a lot of photos for iNaturalist. This is such a neat spot. You can see these huge moss-covered boulders. Looking over here, we have a really nice patch of polypody. Down here, we have some more trillium. So just a lot of really cool plants in this area, and we can see the waterfall up ahead there. This is Jacoby Falls. And look at the size of this birch tree. I guess this is yellow birch. It's huge though. I climbed up a little bit higher, and I have to be really careful. And actually, I know there was someone who fell here a few years ago, and this is not the kind of place you want to get injured. But I'm going to continue up a little higher and see if I can pick up the trail that ends up heading towards Dad Chapman Road. And actually, I might be able to come back down on that road that we saw that headed off before the trail split to head to the waterfall. So I'm just gonna explore up here for a few minutes. All right, well, I made it to the top, and actually looking back down at what I just climbed up, I definitely don't wanna try going back down that way. The waterfall is right over there. But actually, if we turn this way, this is the pipeline that we saw earlier. So to go back, I'm just going to head down that road. Now, there's two different ways I can go. I can continue up the pipeline, or I can continue on this trail that goes towards the top of the falls. I think I'm going to go this way first and see where this leads, and then if that isn't heading the right direction, I might try the pipeline. And here I am at the top of Jacoby Falls, and this is absolutely the closest that I'm going to get to the edge. I do not want to risk walking on that wet rock over there. Winter wrens singing up here as well. I've never been up top here. This is actually really beautiful. Doesn't look like that trail continued on, so I'll probably go back and take the pipeline and see where that leads. Looks like a spider just captured a crane fly, and they've been struggling a bit. Well, the grass is getting high, and there's a tree down across the path, so I think I'm going to turn around here. But at least now I know that if I hike off of Dad Chapman Road, as long as I can hit this pipeline cut, then I'll be able to get back out on the Jacoby Falls side. So maybe someday in the future I'll do that as one long hike, starting at Dad Chapman Road and coming all the way out at the trailhead of Jacoby Falls. If you don't like creepy crawlies, you should look away now, because I found a cool millipede. Zoom in here, get a nice close look at him. My 3-year-old niece Evie is gonna love this guy. And then over here, there's also another, what I believe is another millipede. I don't know if this is a different species or just a smaller one. Looks like a different species. I'll have to put it into iNat and find out what it is. I really like some of the other areas I live throughout the year, like Delaware and Rochester, New York, but really there's something special about being back home here in Lycoming County, Pennsylvania, where I can hike miles and miles on a trail like this. It goes to the most beautiful waterfall, and there's no traffic noise. I haven't seen another person this morning, and this is a fairly well-known location. And I know that there's a lot of people who come here on the weekends. Of course, if you came on a Saturday, you would see other people here. But just in Lycoming County, there's got to be hundreds and hundreds of these kinds of locations where you can do a day hike for hours and hours, just exploring nature and not really see other people. So that's the one really special thing about being in a more rural area sometimes. Now, that said, there's something to be said for being at the really big migration hotspots during the spring and fall migration. So it's all a balance, just depends on the time of year and what you're looking for. All right, I made it out of the woods and onto the boardwalk, and the mosquitoes are getting really bad. All right, I'm back here at the parking lot. Thank you so much for coming along with me for this hike at Jacoby Falls, and I'll see you next time. From Lyco Birds, this is David Brown. Thanks for watching.